super excited to be here with you. We have our lovely panelists. We're going to discuss about bias in AI and in generative AI. And this is going to be a very opinionated conversation, probably, because all our speakers are working and have lots of experience in that field and also serving customers. So one of the things I want to do to make sure it's engaging and you are getting served is we'll have someone that's going to walk with a microphone so you can actually ask your own questions, bring your own concerns to the table around generative AI, around biases, so you can get all the answers that you need in order to take action after you leave this room, hopefully, potentially. My name is Polak. I am the author of the book Scaling Machine Learning with Spark. We had a book signing before at the Prophecy booth. I believe they might have some ebooks for you if you're interested in a copy. If not, ping me on LinkedIn. I can send you the link to Amazon. Cool, so I wanted to let the panelists introduce themselves.
Sweet, you just reminded me. I need to get a hand on your books before it's too late. Big fan of O'Reilly Media. My name is Christina Taylor. I'm a senior staff engineer for Catalyst Software. We build CDPs for our customers on the Databricks Lakehouse platform. And more recently, we have just become a Databricks Ventures company. I hope you're not too tired of my face at this point, because this is the fourth time I have to get up on stage and talk. But I actually did not come from a data and/or AI background. I started off in education. So happy to share a little more as we go further into the conversation. But let me pass it off to Layla.
Thanks, Christina. Hello, everyone. My name is Layla Yang. I am lead solution architect at Databricks. Who cared about Databricks today? Speaking of a bias data, this is really interesting because I'm sitting here and we are a software company, right? And we are a vendor. So my recommendation and my point of view will be extremely biased today. But my background, before Databricks, I was a machine learning engineer in media, entertainment, and communication industry. I worked at a bunch of startups as well as media, big agencies. My focus was data product and bringing machine learning models all the way from experiment to production. Been at Databricks for 4.5 years, focusing on, again, the industry, communication, media, entertainment. Really nice to meet you today and discuss some fun stuff.
All right, lastly, I'm Gavita, Regunath. Unlike Layla and Christina, I don't work for Databricks, but I'm a Databricks partner. I am a principal data scientist with Advancing Analytics. Advancing Analytics is based in London, but we are a fully remote company. So we work with customers all over the world. As a data scientist, I work predominantly with a lot of customers trying to implement machine learning. And now everybody wants LLMs. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. So before we're going to start taking the questions from the audience, I do have one last question for you. It's kind of like a mixed question. So what has inspired you to pursue a career in data and AI, and what do you think are the highlights of that?
Ooh, I love that one. Do you want the real story or the good story?
As real as it goes.
Okay, I'll try, and I'll try to make it good. It's very simple. It's a one-word answer, #money. So I had double major in English and engineering, and I, for whatever reason, decided to throw the engineering one away. So I was a teacher for 3 years in New York City. So my choice was either to default on my rent or get 5 roommates. So I had like 5 part-time gigs all the time just to pay the bills. But one of the gigs was to advise students on career choices. So I did a lot of research on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I'm giving myself the data-informed decision. You know what? This is the era of big data. Like Hadoop has just gained prominence, and cloud data warehouses on the rise. I really thought there was going to be a future here. It wasn't easy. I had to start as an entry-level data analyst, worked with and reported to people who are much younger than I. I went all the way to analytics manager. I had a bit of an identity crisis, and then I thought, okay, you know what? your business intelligence, your AI is only as good as your data. So I really wanted to focus on distributed systems, data platforms, and open source technologies. I'll get into the quality of the data a little later, but I hope that was a good story.
This is awesome. My story is a little bit boring. I studied physics in my undergrads, and I came to the United States for my PhD in experimental physics. So data is always part of my world. But I quit my PhD, and I can borrow your reason. I need to pay my rent. I came to New York City. It's an expensive city. So I said, oh, what's the degree that could get me a real job here besides physics? So I got a machine learning degree. Statistics first, and then statistics became, a oracle, a fossil. And then I got a machine learning degree, and then I start getting into machine learning and AI. My first job was in the hedge fund. Culture didn't align with me, so I just found myself into media entertainment. So I became much happier, and now my biggest passion and pleasure is to help my customers to build the next generation of lakehouse and AI. So that's my story.
Fantastic.
I'm not sure that I can top that. But right, like with every teenager, I had to decide at 18 years old what I was going to do. And I leveraged my strength in maths and science and said, right, I'll do computer control systems engineering, also an engineering background. At the end of my third year in the UK, I had to choose a project, and I liked the sound of pattern recognition of cancerous cells. That's when my journey into data and AI started. That was about 25 years ago. And ever since then, I ended up doing my PhD with Rolls-Royce, looking at gas turbine engines, trying to improve climate change. It was very interesting. Did that for 10 years and managed to move to automotive. We've got Jaguar Land Rover in the UK that we did a bit of work with them. And I've ended up in consultancy with a great company, Advancing Analytics. So that's my journey.
Amazing. Definitely a super interesting journey, especially Rolls-Royce. When did you get to drive the actual new cars?
No, Rolls-Royce planes, so the jet engines, that's actually going to take me home tonight.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. So now we're going to open up the stage for you all to kind of ask questions. I do have more questions that we have here. Our friend who's going to, yeah, we have questions.
How's it going? Thank you guys for doing this. I know, I hope it's always growing, but I'm wondering, like, kind of how long have you guys been in the industry, and, have you seen, more people like yourself as time passed? Like, have you been working with more, more women? And, just in terms of diversity overall, what has that been like for you guys?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, the question was like, how many years are you in the industry, and what's like the diversity and maybe kind of like the cycles of machine learning also? Because there is a notion of cycles that's happening.
No, I'm wondering, like, like as women in tech and like whatever, are you experiencing, more, women and just more diverse environments, like as you progress through your career?
That's a great question. So when I started working in Rolls-Royce, I was the only lady. And that was probably persistent for the last 20 years. I think we're doing a lot better in terms of diversity and trying to get more women into data. So I'm a Women in Data Science ambassador, Women in Data back in London as well. So we are trying to do a lot in terms of encouraging more women into the field of data. 20 years ago wasn't great, but I certainly see things changing now.
Wow, I wish I could tell you that the history is just a linear progression of humanity from beginning to enlightenment, but I think the overall trend is progress is being made, but we're not quite there yet, and there are some regressions. I'm very used to being on a large tech team of maybe 20 even 20 plus engineers and being the only woman. And I remember questioning myself, like, how much harder would I have to work for me to be taken seriously? Or are my male colleagues being paid a lot more based on for the same role? And what is also fascinating to me is once you find your champions and your supporters and your circle of colleagues and women, they tend to stay together. I've been on some engineering teams when all 4 of them are women, and these other engineering teams have no women. And in my current organization, oh, by the way, there's an opening on my team. So my CTO is a woman, and among engineering leadership of 9, we have 5 women.
That's good.
I hope that's true for Databricks.
Databricks is, well, it's not linear, I definitely agree. I think that question triggered me to look back a little bit at the beginning of my education, say in elementary school or middle school. My teacher, my professor always told us, you can become whoever you want to become. Just chase your dream. Don't let math and science become a boys' club. So I did. I chased my dream. I pursued physics. And it's, I don't know, at some point, it just fewer women in the field, especially in tech, especially in big data and the leadership. So I agree with you that you sometimes when you walk in the room, you have to, step up a little bit, demand the attention to make your voice heard. But I think at Databricks, we definitely embrace diversity, and we're definitely making a very, very active effort to recruit people from different background, from different age. So yeah, I've seen both sides making progress, working progress.
Yeah, and if I may add, there are more groups, right? It's not only women, there's also more groups that considered underrepresented in tech. And I feel like the more we get together and we help each other, the more we can do and the more we can grow in that field. So kind of having mentors, kind of like, your own committee of mentors that can help you push forward, people that are willing to take a bet on you and all of that, it's really, really critical. So if you have, or if you are part of an underrepresented group, make sure you build those relationships and build those connections that will later help you propel in your career.
I love to see how the question about bias around AI is so popular. The room is full. And also it's refreshing to see only women on the stage during this whole session, so I love it. Thank you for that. So the question that I had is, how much of yourself, and I love the diversity of ethnicity that there is on the stage, but how much of yourself do you have to bring in a company when it comes to your insight and your cultural value on this whole Gen AI conversation? And also as a woman, and maybe a sister, a mom, a daughter, or whatever the role you may have, how Gen AI can help you get your job done better?
That's a good question.
Great question.
I kind of want to address, I want to go back to our original thought, like your large language models or data science or machine learning is only as good as your data. And now we're sitting here talking about Gen AI, and everyone's so incredibly excited about it. And I will admit to you, I'm actually terrified. I'm terrified because I don't know how the training data has been collected. If there's any quality control over there and the representation of different cultures and genders. I'm terrified because I don't understand the metrics and who is evaluating it. So let's say this is 90% accurate. So first of all, the success metrics are average, it's not representative. So okay, if the sample is collected upon average age, size, height, American male, it might not work for us. And in the second place, who is evaluating the accuracy? So let's say the data labelers themselves, if they come in with their own bias and we're all biased, so how would you ensure that your metrics are unbiased? So, and I think I don't have a perfect answer for this, but perhaps the first thing we can do is to acknowledge these risks and trying to bring in as many diverse perspectives as possible, making sure that every ethnicity, culture is as much equally represented as possible, and knowing that we try our best to get there.
That's a really awesome perspective. I am in the other side of the spectrum. I love using OpenAI to automate lots of my work, but I also I am aware that the data is biased. It's most likely biased. Maybe I am biased because I just assume the whatever OpenAI, don't quote me on that, and I don't know if there is any OpenAI on the seat right now, but I assume the data they train from the internet, from the beginning of time and entire history of the text, there is biased viewpoint, and probably I don't fully agree, exist in the training data. So the LLMs will spit up the answer that just biased to a certain I don't know, religious aspect or political aspect, but one thing I use that for is for negotiation. English is my second language. Also, I found difficult to sound like a native speaker to argue with, I don't know, my boss or my male counterpart, my peers. So I want to sound more like them. And OpenAI, at least I found very effective for myself, is to use that generate text that sounds, the tone sounds like a male counterpart, so that I know how to sound like them. So that's utilize the biased outcome to equip myself to achieve what I want.
It's quite clever.
Does it make sense?
This is very clever.
Yeah, very clever tool.
I'm like you. I love generative AI. I work in machine learning, so I love it. I embrace it. However, with any kind of machine learning models, I think at the end of the day, we as people using it have to be ultimately responsible. So, for example, we use a lot of Midjourney to generate images. But I don't know whether you've had a chance to play with Midjourney, but if you use Midjourney, generally you get white males. In the age of 30, you don't get diversity represented with Midjourney. However, there is an option for you to change that a bit, and use the input to your advantage by massaging it. So letting the model know that you want to see more diverse group of representation to get that image out from generative AI. And I think this goes back, in terms of machine learning, rubbish in, rubbish out in terms of data. You need to be in charge of your data, number one, and number two, make sure it's representative.
Yeah, and I can say maybe a story about what happened to me yesterday. It's not related to, kind of related to generative AI and the space of bias. But essentially, we had kind of a meeting, and then later on, we had dinner. It was 6 people. 5 of them are men around their 60s, well-known in the industry, prosperous people. And we talked about Gen AI and all the capabilities and what it's going to bring to the table. And kind of I brought the topic of bias and all this kind of stuff. And, their response was, hey, we'll do it, and then we'll fix it. And that actually speaks about the fact that we need to create awareness, because all those people, with deep pockets that are investing in big companies, wants all the companies to run fast, we still need to be conscious and say, okay, there is a huge opportunity, but there's also a risk to propel a lot of the biases by automating them. So all the inherent bias that you already have, all the unconscious bias, automating that approach is going to increase it dramatically. So this is something that we should be aware of and actually create more awareness in the industry and have more conversations about that. So just personal story I wanted to share, and we have questions there.
Well, actually, that's a perfect segue to my question. I'm work in healthcare, and so the stakes are really high. We can't really just throw something out there and see if it works. We can do a lot of harm for patients. Mostly we're evaluating LLMs, some patient interaction, just because our executive leadership, they really want to embrace this new technology. We're a little bit skeptical. So I'm wondering if any one of you have developed any metrics. I've gone to a couple lectures on metrics for LLMs, and I'm just, most of them one of them in particular was outcomes and outcomes proxies, prompt engineering, and then expert evaluation afterwards. And then the other challenge for us is just getting an idea of the population that it's been learning from or trained on. And then I have one more issue, is that we have to use it in a private environment. It can't be open, because we're putting patient records into it. So it's not really learning. We use kind of a static model. So anyway, the first one is just the metrics. How do we evaluate it? Because we can't just go throw it out there and say, oh, let's see how it goes with that knee replacement, or whatever.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm not a data scientist. I'll probably give these ladies the final answer on that. But my question to you is, what is the metric? So I'll tell you a real story. Like for 6 years of my life, I was just battling with a nasty personal injury. I wanted to go skiing in winter, but I had knee problems. And I go to the best doctors in the country. They tell me, oh, this procedure would have a 95% success rate for the first time and 85% success rate for the second time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's all great. So forget about the sample size and how success rate among what for a second. Okay, so maybe it's 95% successful for the majority of the people. I'm just an outlier. But for me, that's 100%. So how can you, whatever success metric your LLM recommends, and when it comes to stakes such as high as individual lives, it doesn't matter. This is 100%. So is there an alternative that we can use, or rather than just metrics?
Thanks, Christina. That's a very personal story. Yeah, that's awesome. I think, the evaluation is hard. I just put it bluntly. I can share some experiences that we learned from the field from helping different companies across the industry building LLM. One is, I'll probably take one step back. Databricks, yesterday we announced Lakehouse IQ and all that. We just acquired a company that help you build your own smaller, more affordable LLM, Mosaic ML. We want to tear down the black box around LLM. We want everyone understand what's the data in, because what's the data in matters the most, right? But how do you fix hallucination? How do you fix the wrong result? Right now, as far as I know, my customers still have human in the loop, have human read the text and then label it and then retrain it. And they vectorize, they train an embedding model, convert the text into embedding, and then to see how far away from the vector really is, the sentiment, and figure out whether or not it makes sense. And even if the sentiment are similar, the text, the fundamental emotions are similar, still there are nuances in human language that it can be perceived only by human for now. So still need human in between.
Yeah, I'd agree. In fact, I had a conversation with Dan, who's sitting in the front here, about just that. Right? How would we evaluate LLMs? And I think the frank answer is people are still figuring it out. And you heard in the keynote this morning with LangChain, I'm surprised, I'm excited. I'll definitely be looking forward to their evaluation framework. Dan has also mentioned, which is new to me, OpenAI have evaluation frameworks, but ultimately it's having human in the loop, making sure somebody's still verifying the output to just make sure it's not hallucinating and you're getting the ground truth. So I think it's work in progress, to be really honest.
Hi all. So I am a data scientist, I'm a woman, and also I focus a lot on the responsible use of AI in healthcare. So I'm sorry to ask now a third question about your identities. But throughout my career, I've noticed a lot that this work of addressing bias and kind of shepherding in new initiatives to do things responsibly often does land on minoritized people within those fields. So it feels like there's that added burden, that added weight of responsibility, and it can lead to burnout. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak to your experience of this, and also if you have any advice on, when we're bringing possible solutions on bias within, an inherently biased workplace as minorities, how do you actually get buy-in on those solutions? How do you get resources, more time, and also more people, including, the white men, to really contribute to this work as well, so that it doesn't always keep landing on people who are also trying to make it ahead in their career and don't necessarily need to be siphoned off doing this work, which sometimes is deemed less important than, say, producing a big model on time. And if it works, and we'll deal with the bias stuff later.
So just to make sure I understand the question, you work in the field and you want to understand how you can create buy-in within the organization to get the resource to support responsible AI. Is that?
Yeah, and if you have any advice and kind of an experience in that, and if I'm sure you've probably all experienced burnout as a result of trying to do this work in addition to your main job responsibilities.
Yeah.
I can go first. I think that's a very difficult question. I can try and attempt to answer that. But based on my experience, you've got to get buy-in from senior stakeholders as the only way forward with things. Responsible AI should be a responsibility of everybody, not just a small group of people. And I think it comes down to education, and letting people know what are the causes, if you like, or consequences if you don't take that seriously. And ultimately, it's just about making them understand what you're ultimately responsible for and why we should be considering responsible AI a lot more than what we already do. Some companies or some organizations don't really have any importance in responsible AI, but I think it certainly it has to be core of every organization working in the field of AI and machine learning. So I'm not sure whether that's answered your question, but I think change management possibly, just education and trying to get your voice heard is the only advice I have. Yep.
Yeah. Maybe I can, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can just add, I think that I can resonate with that 100%, and I can give you a real world example, not just Databricks, but from my previous company, hiring. So during hiring process, the entire interview panel are highly biased to male. Even in Databricks, we try to improve that, but it's just sample size. You random sample, and then you get interview panel that's biased towards a certain type of view and certain type of, image, right? And then we actually have it's not generative AI, but an AI model to score the candidates. What's the possible compensation that we should offer that might get the highest offer acceptance rate, right? So the model just think about it. The model will score lower for female, unfortunately, than male, almost in almost any field and any position and any level. So that's not a solution, but my action is I will just raise my hand, go to every interview that I could, I have a say, and I can contribute a data point that feeding back to the compensation scoring model to reevaluate how much the candidate worth. So that's very biased towards action, but certainly you need buy-in from the top, from stakeholders. They need to embrace this bold move, not just relies on what's the norm, what's the status quo.
Well, are you suggesting that I stop checking the self-identification box when I submit for interviews? I'm always terrified of doing that. I know they say we're not supposed to use that information, but I actually don't know if it's a human reading my resumes or whatnot. But then again, as someone who does interviews right now, I hear this crazy suggestion that, oh, why does everybody look so great on paper as a PySpark engineer when I start interviewing them, and they haven't written Spark for 4 years? So I was told, oh, maybe they just put white text on the PDF file that are invisible to human eyes that passes your scoring algorithm. So I laughed to myself, wow, okay, sweet, nice trick. There's like an interesting fact that I want to share with you, and I really think the salary transparency laws, despite creating some difficulties on employers that I acknowledge, and I understand that we want to be considerate of current employees' feelings or blah, 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 but you know in which city in America women earns the highest percentage, like cents to the dollar than anywhere else? That is Denver, Colorado, and 98 cents to the dollar. Followed by like Seattle, California, New York City, several other cities. And you know what they have in common? Salary transparency.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. I also want to share a little bit about how to create buy-ins. And that's really a tricky conversation because sometimes you can have, there's no good answer for it, first of all. I'll put it that way. But sometimes you can have buy-in from upper management, like executive, but you don't have buy-in from middle management because middle management are essentially kind of like a sandwich. They have to operate, they have to deliver impact. Sometimes they don't even have the ability to make big decisions. They just, hey, there's the plan, they need to deliver, they need to make a lot of stakeholders happy. And I also want to say something that I wouldn't say 2 years ago probably. The work climate has changed. And so if we had a louder voice, all underrepresented people had louder voice 2 years from now, where there was a huge growth in the industry, a lot of positions are out there. Now, unfortunately, the people who are suffering the most are underrepresented people because they have a slightly different conversation, slightly different agendas that they want to promote, and so on. So there's also a personal price that might be, so if anyone is deciding to go all in on that, make sure you are aware of those unconscious, unfortunately, biases that exist everywhere and anywhere. And it's kind of like the regression that you said in the beginning. We had a really good growth. Everyone said, okay, we want to hire for diversity. We're going to create an inclusive environment for all this diversity talent that we're bringing on board. We need people, just bring more and more people. Now we're actually seeing the opposite, a decline. A lot of people that were laid off are from underrepresented group, if you look at the statistics, unfortunately, and that's like big, unfortunately. So when going that path and trying to create buy-ins, making sure that it aligns with impact, actual ROI for the business, from my experience, that's the best way to go. If there are customers complaining, if there's opportunity, growth opportunity for the product, and you can show, this will land us so-and-so customers, depending on the size of the company and how much visibility you have into it, I believe this is the best way to go, because otherwise, with this climate, the conversation had changed, and I've seen it from different organizations that I'm supporting, and now people are, very much into their boxes, and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So.
The one question I have is more tier two. Where do you think government fits into all of this, in a sense that we talked about government and business and community? We want the community to help the people in there. We want to give the idea to the business. But at a certain point, those two aren't enough. Where do you see the government coming in effect to put in policies or put in things to where, yes, you develop this model, but you guys have to have a human checker to do that?
How do I say this without sounding like a socialist? I think the government has a responsibility to educate and to enforce people to do the right thing and to regulate. But I understand that things can move very slowly, and there are objections and objective difficulties.
I'm so glad I'm not running for the office, but it's a very tough question. I certainly don't know the White House agenda, but I can share my thinking or my feeling about that is LLM is just generative AI is another piece of a technology. It's just like the beginning of the internet or the beginning of machine even 100 years ago. How can we be responsible and taking into account people's well-being, taking into people's satisfaction for creative work, right? And then you vote for it, and we're still waiting for the government, I won't say stepping in, but definitely enforce some regulations and again, I definitely bias. I'm from China. I think there are good things that through my childhood that Chinese government did really well. That is sheltered me away from some of the information that probably not good for me while growing up to open up to the entire internet. Again, I'm biased. So I think for LLM, it's even more extreme because lots of things are not fact-based. Worrying the experimental physicists had a little bit. Everything, when you observe, there you have this, what do they call? Observer bias. Yeah, it just exists for everyone.
Yep.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, one last question.
Hi. So I actually thought the question that was earlier about how to keep these the responsibility of making sure the minority voices are in the model or even just within the group, not just exclusively fall on the minorities within the group is actually really good. I'm a manager of a small team of researchers, and we, unfortunately, we are not very diverse in the group. So I guess do you have any tips on how to balance that kind of act between, making sure that the models and the data that we create doesn't have the bias of the group within it, but at the same time not saddling those staff members who are members of might have the best perspective on that task without making them being the sole kind of bridges. I think it's a really difficult question because then I'm not sure if I would trust my perspective on it to actually accurately capture the experiences they want to make sure it's incorporated into the model or the work or even just the discussion of the group. But the same token, it just can't fall exclusively on them. So, from your experiences, do you have any input on how, I might be able to manage that task a bit better in terms of within my own group?
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, they want to make sure that he's managing a group of engineers, and they want to make sure they are adhering to all these biases, but they don't want it to be a bottleneck on the team. So if you know of any ways, tools, systems in order to reduce or remove biases as much as possible, so when they are developing their AI or generative AI systems, they already used all the tools available in the ecosystem in order to remove biases, so they don't need to build them from scratch.
I guess this is not focusing on generative AI, is that right? Or are you talking particularly on LLMs?
Inclusive of it, not exclusively generative AI, but more generally the overall kind of just inclusivity of the group and everything else.
Yeah. So as a company, we have an ethical canvas that we tend to go through with any project. We tend to go through several questions in terms of identifying data sets, for example. Have we used data sheets for data sets? I'm not sure whether you've seen that, where you go through a series of questions to understand how the data set was created for the model that you are intending to build. There's another framework that Microsoft has brought out recently that also, in the same kind of vein, would ask you to go through several questions to make sure that the data set that you've collected is comprehensive, for example. Those are the kind of frameworks we would add up as a company. There are lots of frameworks out there. We particularly like the responsible AI framework that's been provided by Microsoft. I think it's the most comprehensive framework that's out there. We tend to follow that, and we've built an ethical canvas based on Microsoft Responsible Framework. Fantastic.
I can share maybe a little bit about, we have a minute or not, but I can say about Jones Snow Labs. They have NLP tests, so they already baked in a lot of good testing for human data. So if you're looking for a specific library or tool to actually take advantage without you needing to do like deep research, this team already has been working and operating in the NLP world, I think, for the last decade or so.
Yeah.
And they have the researchers, and they create open source tools for us to take advantage, run our tests, and they can also offer us more tests and give us a good estimation, a score to our data specifically, so we can actually take actions on behalf of this. It's like very practical bits. Hopefully it will help. Any more tools or something you want to mention? No? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. You can find all of us on LinkedIn, right? Happy to connect, answer more questions, and let's make the world more responsible.